Call of Duty World War II, a game that in the franchise swung one way or the other depending on who you were. Some absolutely loved it, some couldn't stand it at all. Personally for me, it was one of the more enjoyable Call of Duty titles that I had played, and one of the first ones that I even reached Master Prestige with since Call of Duty Ghosts. It held my attention the entire way through the year, though many dropped off before the end of that year, but it was still a game that had its ups and downs, some good and some bad. And as we wind down with the following year's title of Black Ops 4, I wanted to revisit it a little bit and see just how much it held up in my mind, but to see also where it was at in its current state in the nearing portions of late 2019. So today we're going to jump back a little bit in time and take a look at what Call of Duty World War II is like in 2019. So, Call of Duty World War II was the complete package. Had campaign, multiplayer, and zombies, and even introduced a new feature called the Headquarters at the time, which upon launch actually was probably one of the biggest problem makers for the game. This social space, built to be very much so like the tower from Destiny, was the next step in Sledgehammer's communal advancements. They played around with the idea of seeing other players in a real-time position with all their customization and such in that pre-game lobby within Advanced Warfare, but they wanted to take it a step further. They wanted to make it something that players ended up seeing everybody and could just hang out there. They could end up interacting in the headquarters and having things to do. So they built this thing out, but upon launch, well, it was the main landing platform for any time you connected online. So upon connecting online, you'd have to go into the headquarters and then matchmake from there, not the other way around where it is currently, where you go to a landing page, you can choose to launch into the headquarters, or you can go straight into matchmaking. Because of that, the launch wasn't as smooth as intended, and it put people off initially. The campaign, though, was a riveting story that definitely captured the attention of players, and with those maybe launch troubles, may have been your best bet in terms of experiencing the game a little bit firsthand while those server issues were going on. Of course, you could still jump into MP, or you could jump into zombies. The studio's take on the classic genre now building at the time within the Call of Duty franchise, starting of course with Treyarch zombies, then being touched upon in Infinite Warfare by Infinity Ward, and then taking a more so horror route, playing on the history that Sledgehammer had with Dead Space to make it a little bit more of the edge of your seat experience in Call of Duty World War II. All three modes had something to offer for all players that were interested, and initially after those first couple of troubles with the launch and servers, it was a hit. Whether or not you stuck around, that may be a different story. A lot of players saw declining interest because of the realism in the game. It wasn't something that was flashy that kept their attention. There were definitely some things that players weren't too big of fans of with the division system, and a few other things that came about with that. However, during the early months of 2018, Sledgehammer made some changes with the division overhaul, which changed some of the core fundamentals of the division system, and a short bit later, Sledgehammer kind of denounced the whole realism and immersion thing, and then started to have some fun with stuff. Seeing the introduction of things like Attack of the Undead, where zombies invaded MP, we saw some experimental weaponry and all things considered, even all the way up to the point where the final DLC map for War was actually a bunker with experimental weaponry such as the Nazi Bell and other supernatural occurrences, all being tested on by the Reich. So the main year of content was definitely one that was seemingly a roller coaster depending on who you asked, but still I thought was generally enjoyable. But how's it play in 2019? Is it something that you can find some decent lobbies? What's the player count like now that we don't have an accurate measure like we did in the past with player counts actually listed? How's the hit detection? Is it anything that, because there may not be as many players, maybe you're not getting the best of lobbies? And is it something that's a refreshing change of pace to what we have right now? Let's start out from the top down from all of that. Firstly, the playlists are something that may not be exactly how you remember. In the match type selection, you end up seeing things like TDM, Domination, War, and Free-for-all, which of course you may remember exactly from how they were, but later on you end up seeing things like Domination, Hardpoint, and Kill Confirmed all in one playlist selection, and an objective mosh pit, which is things like CTF, Search and Destroy, and Gridiron. Those were all individually parted out so that you could choose each individual game mode in the main year of its support. Since then, Sledgehammer has put these into a compiled playlist with other game modes, and that's usually something that denotes lower player counts so that it doesn't take away from the matchmaking experience, that it doesn't mean that your only options are connecting to somebody halfway across the world from you. This is probably most recently seen within Black Ops 4 and the PC version of it. There's been compiled playlists for the PC version of Black Ops 4 since a couple of months after launch actually, which is kind of crazy to think about. But when considering things like Gridiron and CTF already had very low player counts, it's a rational move to put them in a sort of mosh pit of a couple of game modes. But is it an indication that there are low player counts all around the game? Not necessarily. If you jump in, you'll likely find a match very quickly. I ended up finding one immediately, actually, right after I pressed Q for TDM, and sure, it might be something that is due in part to it being on the main menu tiles, but you jumped in very quickly. As for the lobbies themselves, well, it's probably going to be a lot of players that are all Master Prestiges simply because of how much time has passed. They might not necessarily be the most hardcore and grindy players, whereas you may not have wanted to play a Master Prestige in, say, month 3 of the main year of content, but by now it's just a matter of time. The players that stuck with it, naturally going to be that high level. One thing that I will say, though, jumping back in and having played a bit as of the last couple of days, is that I definitely forgot how many people used S-mines everywhere and used requisitions for their streaks. It was pretty annoying, but that's something you just gotta get along with, unfortunately. You start to learn the familiarities of those and start to expect where S-mines may be or where players may be sitting in corners. Overall, another thing in-game that was definitely different was that of the pace. Of course, if you weren't running, say, Airborne, you were much slower than that of what you may be used to with Black Ops 4. That was something that jumping back on for the first time in a long while the past couple of days, that different pacing was something that was tough to get used to. It's actually very similar to maybe, say, Modern Warfare's pacing, but without that super sprint, without that ability to be a little bit faster in terms of that movement, but the map flow and the play and how everything worked out was very similar. It was definitely something that might actually be a good starting point to jump back to if you want to get familiar with how it will play this fall. Maybe that'll be a good place to jump in with. But it was definitely different and something you had to get used to. You had to accommodate your playstyle to be a little slower, and then maybe once you got, say, a specialist streak, you were a little faster and could move a little quicker on your feet. But that's something that's a fair note to mention as well. Hit detection was one that in some games felt spotty. Those games, though, being ones that were played in the late hours of the night my time, so 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., sometimes maybe upwards of 4 a.m. if I really broke my sleep schedule. But in that sense, there really isn't all that many other people to connect to from around the world unless they're across the pond. Even at that point, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., even on the West Coast, that's something that it's still late into the night, so I'd be playing with the early morning grinders, probably in the UK or over in Europe. So those sort of questionable deaths, of course, would be something that would be natural. But overall, it seemed like it was still relatively good. It was definitely still playable. The time to kill is definitely quicker than that of Black Ops 4, so in that sense, again, it's something that's going to take a little getting used to if you go back and try and change it out. Same thing, though, went for Modern Warfare. The time to kill there was incredibly fast compared to Black Ops 4, but you just got to get used to it and start to adjust your playstyles to maybe not put yourself so much in an open area. Now, what's great for World War II, or at least what was great, was that it still got some support, even though it was second chair to Black Ops 4 at the time and not getting the main content support updates. World War II actually had a decent number of updates that went on well into this year even, with the most recent coming in early June, so just a couple of months ago, adding different weapons, adding some different collection unlocks, and even as it stands right now, everything is unlocked with still that timed rotation of weapon contracts from the Quartermaster, so those are all things you could take advantage of, and still to this day can take advantage of, meaning that if you want to jump on for the first time in quite some time, not only will you have a decent time finding lobbies still seemingly, your headquarters will be relatively populated, your lobbies will be relatively populated. The hit detection and connection isn't all that bad. There are no things like modders in this game, simply because it's all on current generation hardware, so things like JTagging wouldn't be a relative issue like you'd have to worry about in, say, the classic CODs of MW2, Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3, those kind of games that may bring back some nostalgia, but may interfere with your gameplay experience. Those sort of things don't exist here, and there's still a lot of ways that players can be rewarded. Things that I absolutely loved within World War II and I love to see again on my screen when I jump back into play were things like your mail station for simply giving you in-game earnable credits every couple of hours just simply for being there, logging on. Your daily login bonuses were something that were awesome as well, a system that we saw in Infinite Warfare, we saw within World War II, but we didn't see in Black Ops 4 and we don't know will come back in Modern Warfare. I'd love to see it return. You had things like your after-action random supply drop, which just for playing awarded players randomly with an extra drop or two. Additionally, you had things like your, of course, Major Howards and Quartermaster, where you had your daily orders and different things you could earn supply drops organically, you could earn weapons organically, you could earn armory credits, social score, all that kind of stuff. It just added for another layer of things to grind out. Things like your collections, of course, were fantastic. You had specific supply drops that didn't too badly muddy up one singular loot pool like we've seen in Black Ops 4, like we saw in Black Ops 3, like we saw in Infinite Warfare. Those things ended up being parted out even ever so slightly that made the odds of getting things from a certain collection a little bit better. Of course, with the collections though, then you could end up using that organic unlock of armored credits and actually getting the things you want for nothing but the time you put into the game. That stuff was absolutely fantastic and made for what I honestly believe was one of the most refreshing changes of pace. If I had to go back and play one of the recent Call of Duty titles, I'm talking post Black Ops 2. So anything after Black Ops 2, I would honestly say that the ones that I want to go back to the most are Modern Warfare Remastered and Call of Duty World War II. Simply because, one, I really enjoyed the base games of those. Modern Warfare Remastered, yes, wasn't an exact identical one-to-one copy the entire way through from COD 4, but it was something that it took that experience, modernized it a little bit, and added in a lot more to do, and also was a rewarding grind in its own sense, and World War II being its own unique thing within the franchise that still, yes, played on the roots of Call of Duty, but was its own story, was its own game, was something with its own weapon catalog. That kind of stuff was a lot of fun to play around with, and of course, with such a rewarding sequence of events that I could get everything, and did get everything pretty much up until the last 2 updates, which came in the last couple of months. I had every single weapon without putting a single dime into COD points, supply drops, anything like that. I simply just played the game and was rewarded. That's how it should be, and that's what I really love. And it made for a very nice, refreshing pace to revisit all of that coming back to it. So that said, that's Call of Duty World War II in 2019. I absolutely loved my time here playing it. While Black Ops 4 is dwindling down, I might go back and play a little bit more before I jump into Modern Warfare. Again, pacing-wise, TTK-wise, it's similar, not identical to Modern Warfare, but definitely closer than Black Ops 4. So having an enjoyment factor on that and also giving myself maybe an advantage to jump in and get used to that kind of stuff and the playstyles I'll need in the upcoming year, to me, it's a win-win. So that said, that's Call of Duty World War II in 2019. Jump on if you guys are interested at all, even in the slightest, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Is there anything in particular that you really miss out of World War II? Anything that you really loved and would love to experience once again? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, but hopefully enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below, and of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Call of Duty. As we ramp up towards Modern Warfare, we're going to be killing it with the content, so make sure you don't miss a single thing. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of it. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, there's the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. I can live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, wherever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. With that said and out of the way, thank you guys all so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.